Narayanam namaskritam naram cheva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jayodire nashta prayasho bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashuki bhakti bhavati naistiki Nigama kalparudugaritam param shukamakaramitta dravisamitam pibata bhagatam rasham vairo
Narayanam
mahora
namaskritam
hodashi
naram chaiva
bhuvabhaka
narottamam devim
Krishna swadam bhagate dhamikavinishaha karonasta drishamasho paranako dunoditam Tamapiya Davashuta Vishutam Vibhu Samyapirayana Vidambrihuksharam Prakyahidaho Mahuradi Tatmanam Sankleshanavana Musanin Nanyatam Om Aganati Marandasyanganangana Salakya Chaksurun Minitam Yanatashmahi Sugirave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yanabhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Siguru Sita Parakamanam Shrigarun Vaishnavam Cha Sirupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sayitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Ladita Shivishakan Vitam Cha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sanyavadi Praskata Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Welcome to Transcendental Tuesday, one and all. Ram Kishore from Minnesota, Radhe Sham out of Utah, Twilly, Jean Eskelson from Salt Lake City, Natasha, Hare Krishna, good morning. We'll try to answer your question that you left us with at the end of the session yesterday, how to better control the mind. Sundari Priya, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. Tomorrow, let me remind you, we're going to have as our guest Sankirtan Das, probably one of the world's foremost authorities on the great epic, the Mahabharata. Not only has he written his own translation of the Mahabharata in an abridged form, we bought a case from him recently, have him in our gift store, but he has dramatized pretty much all the scenes from the Mahabharata and directed, produced, and acted in them over the course of the 50 years that he's been a devotee. Even in Utah, we'll tell you more about the time when he and just two other actors did the entire well, not the entire, but they did an hour-long version of the Mahabharata on the campus of BYU to great acclaim and full attendance by the BYU student body and several teachers in the World Religions Department. So Sankirtan Das, I ran across a picture of him and his wife 50 years ago. I may be able to post that tomorrow just for your enlightenment. They got married and they started chanting Hare Krishna on the same day 50 years ago. I think it was yesterday was their anniversary. And the interesting thing is, there's a picture of Sankirtan Das and his wife 50 years ago, on the day they got married and the day they started chanting, and he looks younger today than he did then. That's not very flattering to him in his 50-year ago body, but it should be flattering to his current body to say that he looks younger now than he did then. I'll have to meditate on that overnight and consider whether I'm going to actually bring up that point during my interview tomorrow, but just between you and me, he looks younger now than he did 50 years ago. That's the rejuvenating effects of Krishna consciousness. Good morning, Ali. I assume William is with you. Ram Kishore is joining us briefly. He has his business to run. All right. So let's get into it now. Part of our subject matter will be how to better control the mind, and this verse will assist us in leading into that. Please comment, please hit likes and hearts if you find anything of value here. My wife has given me a brew. It tastes kind of like anise, which she says is meant to help me not to clear my throat so often. I think it's Kulashekar Maharaj says at the time of death our throat will be choked up with mucus and it'll be hard to speak. So if we can't remember Krishna due to all the disturbances that beset us at the time of death, The good news is that Krishna will remember us. So if I'm clearing my throat so often, normally I'm going to definitely be choked up at that critical moment. So therefore I throw myself. Yat para pankaja palasha vlakta kamasanam. I throw myself at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Please remember me at the time of death, even if I don't remember you. And Panchajanya, the pujari who's been 45 years serving the deities in Mayapur, is in very serious condition. He has not improved after 1 week. He still requires high levels of oxygen. He is unable to breathe on his own. So our prayers go out to this great exalted Mahatma who served the Lord faithfully for 45 years, not even left the campus of the Mayapur temple, except on this occasion to go to Calcutta to a hospital. Whether he lives or dies, his future is glorious. He's going to ascend. Nena vrajam ajatiyadvam anubanyam patim pasi patasha shramatichatir durve bhavana bhavata. It was said of Archie, the glorious wife of Maharaj Prithu. She performed the funeral rites for her husband and then herself ascended the funeral pyre. And as the flames immolated the bodies of her and her husband, in their spiritual forms, they rose. And the demigods were looking down from above, from their level of being on the higher planets, seeing Archie elevate in her spiritual body, coming up and up and up and up and up. And they were thinking, oh yeah, she's going to join us. We're going to have a new friend in our social circle or relief society or whatever it is the ladies, the wives of demigods do up there. And they were looking forward to receiving and celebrating and offering a garland and finding a residence for Archie as she rose up towards them. And then she came level to them and they're like, Haribo! And then she kept on going. And as they watched, she went up, up, up beyond the planets of the demigods, out of sight on her way back home, back to God. Prabhupada says the least that happens to a devotee is that he goes to the heavenly planets and enjoys sense gratification, gets that out of his system, and then later on transfers to the spiritual world. But my thought is that Pankajanya, never having been even interested in the sense gratification of this material world, never having even set foot outside of the Mayapur campus, is going to go directly back to home, back to Godhead. So, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And we might as well get into this now, Natasha. Here's a perfect example of someone who's controlled his mind. He didn't go to a cave. He didn't divorce himself from society, segregate himself, live in isolation. In other words, he didn't try to repress the mind. He didn't try to battle it out with the mind in a solitary place. You're going to lose. Arjuna himself, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramatad bhadavadvidaham. Arjuna was a warrior and a family man, but he was no slouch as far as yoga came. He endured a year of exile, during which he decided to make the most of his time and did yoga in the Himalayas, standing on one leg for 1 year. There's a rock carving in Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu, or Andhra, I'm not sure which one, which is said to be the biggest rock carving in the world. I'll find a picture of it for you in the future, with Arjuna as a central figure standing on one leg in the forest, and Lord Shiva approaches him. There's an encounter after which he gets Lord Shiva's weapon, the Pasupati. But here's a person that did yoga, controlled his breathing, stood on one leg in a secluded place for 1 year. And when Krishna starts talking to Arjuna about yoga, Arjuna is like, oh, wait a minute, I can't do that. He says he has experience of being alone, trying to control the mind in a solitary place. And he said, even after a year, I hadn't got my mind completely under control. It's so whimsical and capricious. Controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. Chanchalam means doesn't stay in any one place at one time. Flickers. And isn't that the case with the mind? It just jumps from here to there like a monkey with no rhyme or reason to it. So Arjuna says, controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling one. Chanchalam himana krishna pramatad bharavadvidam tashaham nigaram vayariva siddhuskaram. You might as well try to control the wind as to go into a secluded place and control the mind. And anyway, that's not an option for us. We're married, we have kids, you have a domestic situation, which you and Larry have told me about. It's a little complicated. Whose domestic situation is not complicated? And we have to pay attention. We have to be conscientious to our family affairs, to those who depend upon us. And so going off into the forest, in a cave, to wrestle with the mind is not an option for any of us in this material world. So your question is, how do we control the mind? Living in an urban environment with family affairs, trying to keep everything together in the home, hearth and home. And the answer is engagement. We have senses, and the senses are our best friend. The elements of engagement in Krishna consciousness are very easy, pleasing. What are they? Taking vegetarian food, which is offered to the Lord. Vegetarian food is, ask American Cancer Society, American Medical Association, they all say vegetarian, non-meat food is much more healthy for you. You'll live longer. You'll be much more free of heart disease and arteriosclerosis, as well as osteoporosis. You'll have a better quality life. And it only takes a moment just to recognize the Lord by offering a few simple prayers to Him before you eat the food. You can keep a picture of Krishna on your kitchen counter, a little plate that you put samples of what you cook, and just offer it to Him. This is scientific. It's not sentimental. The Lord creates everything. And if we offer it back to Him in love and devotion, then it becomes consecrated. So by eating, we actually control our mind and control our senses. Most devotees chant in the early morning hours on their beads. They get a set of japa beads and they chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Devotional service, controlling the mind, begins with using your tongue and the various senses that you have in the service of the Lord. And of all the senses that we have, smelling, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, the tongue is the most voracious and difficult to control. If you can control the tongue in the matter of its eating and control the tongue in the matter of speaking, chant for a certain amount of time every day, read the scripture, discuss, wrestle with the philosophy, get to come to terms with it, get a deeper and deeper understanding of the philosophy. I love to memorize verses. It's an excellent way of controlling the mind. I love to recite the verses from memory in the morning hours. It's a way of getting rid of any stress or anxiety which is niggling at me in the morning hours, and it's a good litmus test to see how well I can control the mind and avoid being distracted and having delays in the recitation of my memorized verses. And aside from that, there is a society, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, 800 temples all over the world, lots of services to do. 10 years ago, we would have thought that you had to be personally and physically present at a temple in order to do service. Now we think quite differently. Just as so many people are working from home remotely, there are services that you could do to the worldwide Society for Krishna Consciousness. For instance, if you know computer security, graphic arts and things like that, your impact could be literally worldwide, even sitting in the comfort of your home. But then again, too, it's important to physically visit the temple, stand before the duly installed deities and associate with devotees, and take the prasadam that's cooked in the temple kitchen, join with the greater congregation of devotees in chanting. What all this comes down to is engagement, beginning with the tongue. Ata Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhavet. You serve the Lord. Number one, you engage the senses. And engaging the senses, you serve the Lord by honoring Him with your tongue and honoring His prasadam. Similarly, then the Lord becomes very favorably disposed to someone who's making efforts in His direction. He's seated within the heart. Then the tendency of the mind to careen. I better take Vaibhavi's drink here. Imagine what it will be at the time of death. The throat will be choked up with mucus. Well, it'd be very difficult to chant. So, in as much as we're told it's going to be difficult to chant it in time of death, you better take advantage of it right now. So the Lord within the heart, he purifies those impurities which cause the mind to wander and to go astray. It requires practice. It requires determination. It's not going to happen overnight. Yato nishtalati manischanchanam tadastato nyamya atmani eva vishamaya. Tendency of the mind is to wander. It's been indulged for who knows how many past incarnations. It has had no check on it whatsoever. And now we're going to start to put the reins on. We're going to start to put the bit in its mouth, and it's going to try and spit it out. It's going to try and buck us off. It's going to try and go left when we want it to go right. But just like with training a horse, you can gradually, by determination, you be more determined than the horse. You be more determined to bring the horse under control than the horse is to be out of your control. The horse doesn't have a plan. He's just reflexively and instinctually rebelling against being controlled. But you have a plan. You have a goal. You have a course. And so the advantage is to you. And if you set your mind, if you're bound and determined to control the mind, then you have the advantage. You have the upper hand. Evam buddhi parambuddha samstadyat jahishatar mahabhavo yam daricejya. Bhagavad Gita 3rd chapter says, control the lower self by the higher self. It's not that difficult, but the problem is the higher self has sat on a shelf for many, many lifetimes. It's been disused. We need to wipe the dust off, bring it out, and put it back into use. And the mind and the senses have been having their way for who knows how long. They're going to throw a fit when you reintroduce self-control, intellect, devotional practices into the mix. They're going to have a fit initially. But eventually, if you build up the higher self, the intellect, the soul, you feed it by giving it prasadam, chanting on your beads every single day. The mind is going to follow what the senses are doing. So who knows how long the senses have been running after something nice to taste, something nice to smell, something nice to see, something nice to hear, something nice to touch, unrestrictedly, unmitigatedly. But now we're going to see the deities. We're going to taste prasadam. We're going to speak the name of Krishna. We're going to hear Krishna Katha, Srimad Bhagavatam. We're going to see the deities at the temple, smell the flowers and incense that are offered to the Lord, and use our hands in the service of the Lord. I love this poem. This poem is the answer to your question, how to better control the mind. It's written by a Christian hymn writer named Francis Havergal. Take my life, my Lord, and let it be consecrated to Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of Thy love. Take my feet, let them be swift and beautiful for Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my hands and let them move at the... I might be repeating myself here. Take my lips and let them sing always only for my King. Take my mouth and let it be filled with messages from Thee. Take my silver and my gold, not a mite what I withhold. Take my intellect, use every power thou shalt choose. Take my will and make it thine, it shall be no longer mine. Take my heart, it is thine own, it shall be thy royal throne. Take my love, my Lord, I pour at thy feet as treasure store. Take myself and I will be ever only all for thee. There you go. Engagement. Yat para pankaja palashiva kamasinam gadata udgratyanti tadavam yasyo matyori shotagaram stamaranam bhaja veshadevam. What is very difficult to control the mind and the senses, even for great yogis. They can practice for decades and decades and decades and still not be able to control the mind. So what is very difficult for yogis is very easy for devotees who are engaged in the service of the Lord. They have sought shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. And they ask the Lord, please, I'm sheltering. I'm trying to stick fast as an atom of dust at your lotus feet. Don't kick me away. Just give me some service. Give me something to do. Make some flower garlands. Play some music. Worship you on the altar with incense and flames. Clean the altar. Cook offerings for you. Explain your philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita to newcomers. Just give me some service, Lord, and I'll be happy and satisfied, and my mind will find peace and rest in the shelter of your lotus feet. I hope that's helped. Natasha, if you have any other questions, you can ask them online, or we'll see you on Sunday as well. Once again, for the fourth or fifth time, I believe, our verse, Tadpag Vishargo Janatagavi Plavo Yajmin Pratishokam Pavidabati Pi Namami Antasha Shonikana Srinvanti Gayati Grinati Saravaha. On the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, form, pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed toward bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. Rob, you have any thoughts? You have any practical realizations to share with us about this devotional method of controlling the mind?
Yes, actually, I was thinking about that, Prabhuji. And good morning.
Good morning.
So
Sorry, I didn't
for
even.
me,
Good morning to you.
my mind is still a wild horse, and I'm trying to get the bridle in, and coming to these classes definitely helps me put that bridle back in the mouth and keep it from spitting it out. But for me, action is critical, because when I'm in practice, when I'm doing devotional service, when I'm chanting the holy name, that is preventing the other things from coming in as easily. They still do, but it is easier for me to keep the mind focused, to keep the mind concentrated on Krishna when I actually have a task to do, whether that be chanting, or whether that be just keeping the pastimes in my mind while I'm working, anything like that. And the more I do it, the better I get at it. So it's practice, practice, practice.
Excellent answer. Yato neshariti manas chanchanamastinam tatastito nyamyapyat. Nyamyatat means regular. Make some regular schedule, like chanting japa is the perfect regulated activity to control the mind. After chanting japa, which is ideally done in the morning hours, have your breakfast prasadam. What a powerful way to start the day. You wouldn't think that the simple practices of chanting on beads and having a nice breakfast of Krishna prasadam would be so powerful, would catapult you on your way back to home, back to Godhead. But that's why it said it's so easy. That's why devotional service is so easy. It just involves the natural things that we do every day, talking and eating, but dovetailing in the service of Krishna. And the more you do it, the better at it you get. The mind's going to wander. That's been its habit for who knows how long. But every time you say Hare Krishna with attention, brings the mind back. So the mind wanders again. You say Hare Krishna. That brings the mind back. So you're repeatedly, it's not that when you start, you're immediately a yogi overnight with total mind control. But what happens is, most of the time you're chanting, the mind's off there, going here and there. But when you chant attentively, you bring the mind back. And the better at it, the more practiced at you are at chanting attentively, the more often you bring the mind back, and the longer you cause it to stay. What happens over the course of time is the mind wanders less and stays more. And eventually, yata dipo nibatashto nenkatesho yata yunjasya yogasya yunjata yogam admaraha. The mind doesn't wander anymore. It burns steadily and unwaveringly like a lamp in a windless place. That state of mind is the coveted goal of all yogis and transcendentalists. The peacefulness, the steadiness, the unwavering of the mind is compared to the lamp in a windless place. That can be achieved even in an urban environment, even in a domestic situation, even by housewives and businessmen, artists and farmers, Rob. I'm glad you're practicing in that way. One who has unflinching devotion for the personality of Godhead has all the good qualities of the demigods, but one who is not a devotee of the Lord has only material qualifications that are of known value. That is because he is hovering on the mental plane and is certain to be attracted by the glaring material energy. The mental plane is not the solid foundation that you want for launching your spiritual life. When they shoot off the spaceships from Cape Canaveral, you know that those spaceships start from terra firma. There's a solid foundation. They have to be able to ignite their rockets, and the force of that rocket fuel being ignited has to push against a firm surface in order to get it propelled. Imagine basketball players if they were playing on a sponge floor. There wouldn't be any jumping, would there? They would gather all their energy, tense their calves, bend their knees, and try to thrust themselves upward, and they probably get about 2 inches off the floor. Nobody would watch. They take all the excitement out of it. When Hanuman jumped to Sri Lanka, he launched himself from terra firma, from a very, very firm platform. And so if you want to launch yourself towards the spiritual world, you have to make your foundation, your launching pad has to be something firm, solid, and substantial. And there's nothing more wispy, there's nothing more insubstantial and even treacherous. Sometimes we're walking along and we think we see solid ground, but when we get on it and it's too late, we see that it was actually quicksand, and it just sucks us up. Instead of allowing us to walk undisturbed across the surface, it catches us, impedes our forward progress, and drags us down. The mind is like that. Don't depend on the mind. Many humanists, atheists, they just talk about, well, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. I think I'm a good person. I think you don't need God. You don't need any regular practices. You just depend on your mind and do what your mind tells you is good. The problem is, the mind is not your friend. The mind is your enemy, especially when it's uncontrolled. So controlling the mind is really the crux of the whole business of spiritual life. Pantashtu koti satavatsvaragam vaira tapi manasha munipangam so piashita shinva govinamari purusham tamaham vajami. Yogis who practice repressing and controlling and disciplining the mind, it says after many, many, many thousands of births, they get to see the tip of the toe of the lotus feet of the Lord. But those devotees who want only service of the Lord are already situated. They're already where the yogis aspire to go. They're already fixed as an atom at the lotus. Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam ambishame pavakara tavapara pankajastita delisha bhajantanam. They're already fixed as atoms at the lotus feet of the Lord. I feel a throat clearing coming on, so here's to Bhai Bobby's brew concoction. Who do we have with us? I've got for some reason, a really narrow window here. I'm not able to scroll. Seems like Facebook gives me, Govinda Davis here. Thank you. William and Ali, thanks so much for joining us. Bhakti Gary, Hare Krishna on Transcendental Tuesday. Yes, William and Ali making multiple comments. Bless you. Ram Krishore. William again. Oh gosh, this is... Okay, I hit William and now his whole profile's come up. All right, scrolling here a little bit more. Ram Kishore again. Sundari Priya, thanks for joining us. Yeah, I just have a little tiny window that I'm scrolling and seeing the names. So let's use our time a little more profitably and talk about how a devotee can't get on the mental material platform because a devotee doesn't even see anything as material. So how can you get sucked into the quicksand of material engagement if your vision is that everything is Krishna and you don't even see anything material? In fact, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagna, Brahmaivatanagar, Brahmakarma Shavadinam. So Bhagavad Gita says everything is originally spirit. There's no such thing originally as matter. Things only get labeled material when they're misused. When we taint God's spiritual energy by shunting it away from the service of the Lord under the banner of myself, my family, my friends, my country, my species, that contaminates the originally pure spiritual energy of the Lord. And then we call it matter. But if you don't go there, if your life's energy and focus is on Krishna, Krishna is the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Everything that we do, everything that we give up, all the services that we perform, the gifts that we give, the austerities, they should be done as an offering to Krishna. He's the supreme enjoyer. We're his parts. When we cause pleasure to the whole, that's our highest level of enjoyment. Don't try to, if you're a part, don't try to enjoy separate from the whole. It doesn't make any sense at all. The whole world is godless. If they go to the temple, the church, or the mosque, if they appear before God, they just ask him for enjoyment. They try to make God their step and fetch it for their own material enjoyment. But the vision of a devotee is that everything is Krishna. And all energies, even this inferior temporary energy which surrounds us and which comprises this body, is originally spiritual. So if I keep the integrity of the energy by using it in the service of the Lord, then there is nothing material. And if I don't have the vision of matter versus spirit, then how can I get entangled in matter? And how can I not succeed in controlling my mind? I have a vision that there is nothing but Krishna, there is nothing but spirit, and that's the vision of the Mahatmas. Krishna says, who is a Mahatma? Mahatmanas tumam partha, devim ashritam. Ashritam means shelter, and devi means the higher spiritual energy. Those are Mahatmas who shelter devim ashritam, ananya buddha. Mahatmas tumam partha, devim ashritam ashrita, bhajanti ananyama, gyatva buddhinam avyam. They shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord in the spiritual energy, and everything that they do, their speaking, their eating, their association, their friends, the place they visit, the temples, the missions, everything is connected to Krishna. And so they don't see anything as separate or independent from Krishna. Yomam pasyati sarvata, sarvam chami pasyati, tasyahamrapane sadhane pranashyati. If one focuses on Krishna, Prabhupada said that you either see Krishna directly in his original personal form as Bhagavan, and you can see him in the deity form, you can see him in a picture. He's absolute. There's no difference between the original personal form of Krishna and his deity form, his form in a picture. But you can also see him in so-called inanimate matter, because Bhoktaram Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, everything is the property of the Lord. He created it, and therefore he owns it, and going one step further, he has the first right of enjoyment. Now that supreme enjoyer, the whole of whom we are a part, that supreme proprietor and owner who owns us as well, happens to be our best friend and well-wisher. Now, why would we want to go outside the shelter of his lotus feet? Why would we want to seek protection elsewhere? The economy, the politicians, the political parties, stock market, safe cars, a beefed up, pardon the expression, police system. None of that is our protection. None of that will give us shelter. Look at all the controversy surrounding all these areas, and the uncertainty and the confusion about police enforcement, for instance, about political parties, about the personalities of politicians. It's just dizzying to even go there. No, there's no consensus. Vaccinations now are plummeting. All the people that wanted vaccinations have got them, and the rest of the people are passing. They say, well, I'll just wait. I'll just let everyone get vaccinated around me, and I won't have to get vaccinated. But the problem is, if we don't work together, if we're not all on the same page, if there's not a consensus, 40% of the country doesn't want to get vaccinated, then the whole thing is null and void. Then new variants come up. And not only those who are unvaccinated can look forward to COVID, ventilators. Someone said, if you don't like wearing a mask, you're really not going to like a ventilator. There's no consensus anymore. So why even go there? Why try to achieve consensus in an area which by its very nature is fragmented, divisive? There's so many different forms of sense gratification. There's so many different ways you can go. The difference between devotees and non-devotees is that devotees are single-pointed. They're laser focused on the devotees, the lotus feet of Krishna and the service of Krishna. And the non-devotees, they're all over the map. It's pitiful. It's sad. All the argument, the discussion, the bitterness, everybody wants to own everybody else. Everybody wants to be right, discount or put down everybody else. It's never more evident than now, the stark contrast between materialists and spiritualists. What is day for the materialist is bogus for the spiritualist. Night for the spiritualist. What is night for the spiritualist is day for the materialist. They're worlds apart, totally different focus, totally different emphasis. It is said, a person devoid of devotional service must be driven by his or her own mental concoction to engage in the service of the Lord's external energy. When you serve lust, anger, greed, you serve the material energy, you're cheated. It is said that that service goes on and on and on and on and on and on. The fires of lust and greed and confusion and dissension and bitterness and resentment just get stoked more and more and more and more and more. And there's no end. And thus one plummets. One perpetually revolves in the cycle of birth, death, disease, and old age, being controlled and buffeted by the waves of the material energy. Krishna says, for those who practice by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, taking prasad, who practice controlling the mind, beginning with the tongue, not only do they learn to see me everywhere, not only do they learn to see matter nowhere and spirit everywhere, but I see them. I see them. That means you get the assistance. You get the Almighty Lord who created millions of universes breathing in your direction. His wind is behind your sails. You're going to move forward gradually and inexorably, upward and forward, just like Archie went not only parallel with the heavenly planets, but as the demigoddesses watched, she ascended beyond them, moving progressively back to home, back to Godhead. And that happens by the grace of the Lord. Those who see the Lord everywhere and who see everything as his property are seen by the Lord who dwells within our hearts. He destroys the darkness born of ignorance and makes our crooked ways straight, paves the way back to home, back to Godhead. Someone who is in Krishna consciousness is not buffeted, is not topsy-turvy, is not in the tumbler of the waves of the material energy. Those waves may affect a devotee in somewhat similar ways to those of a non-devotee, but the difference is that non-devotees live on the surface. They live externally, superficially, in the material energy, and they're totally affected by any little tossing and turning of the material energy. Circumstances, people, critics, challenges totally put them off their game. But devotees go deep. Apuryamanam achala pradisham shamudram apravishanti yat taravam harikta matyo shudram shrodikaram sauranam. Apuryamanam achala pradisham samudram apravishantiya tadbat kam yam pravishanti sasantim apnoti nakama kamahi. Elsewhere, Krishna says, Nachukta shabhavana nachabhava is asatosha kutoshikam. He says, one should learn to be happy. When one is happy, one will have peace. But happiness cannot come from the uncontrolled mind. So happiness starts by focusing the mind on Krishna. And once one is focused on Krishna, one feels happiness. And then once one feels happiness, one feels peace. What's unpleasant, what's unhappy about chanting the holy names of the Lord on your japa beads, singing melodically and musically, congregationally, the glories of the Lord in the association of devotees, discussing the absolute truth amongst like-minded people, sitting down to sumptuous, cruelty-free vegetarian prasadam, which has been offered to the Lord? What's not happy about that? Once you have happiness, then you'll have peace. And that peace comes from the depth of Krishna consciousness. The shallow rivers, and lakes, creeks, they're affected by all the motion that happens on the surface. That is not the case for the huge lakes, the huge bodies of water, the ocean. There are waves that act and react on the surface of the ocean. There are rivers that empty into the ocean. There may be agitation on the surface, but because there's so much depth, because the waters go down hundreds and hundreds of feet, if not miles, you only have to go 20 or 30 feet below the surface, and everything's peaceful, calm, and unagitated. So it says, Apurya manamachara pradisham samudana but kama yam pravishanti sasantim apnoti nakama kami. In the, I believe it's the 72nd, the last verse of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, a person who is not disturbed by the incessant waves of material desires, like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but which is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the person who strives to satisfy such desires. Om Tat Sat. So hopefully we gave a little insight about how to control the mind in the most pleasing and effective way. A few words of conclusion, Rob. We're always putting Rob on the spot out there, but he usually comes through.
Yes, probably, and I appreciate it. I'd rather be put on the spot than put on the sidelines.
There you go. You can count on me to always forward. Are you there? Did you accidentally mute yourself? Hello? Rob, let me see if you muted yourself by accident. Rob, unmute. Unmute, Rob. Can you hear me? We really want to hear your comments, your valuable nuggets, but you have to unmute yourself. Whoa, that's a shame. Okay, again, the window for seeing who's joined us is just really small here. It's just really small. And those who liked, I click on the likes, and I'm really not getting anything. So I'm sorry, because I really like this to be as interactive as it possibly can be. I like to recognize you and reciprocate with you. But the looks I've been getting from Facebook lately are just really weird and confining. I'd like to read the list of those who have liked, but it's not responding to my click. Anyway, I think you'll agree we had a good time. It has been indeed lived up to its name. It's Transcendental Tuesday. I'll take your opinions in the comment section as to whether Bhai Baba's brew worked or not, whether I resorted to clearing my throat less often during this past session than normally. Go ahead and free to comment on that. Feel free to comment on our words of advice about controlling the mind. Give your own experience. Give someone who's just starting out in this area, like Natasha, the benefit of your own experience as well. You're welcome to befriend each other, become friends on Facebook, and also have dialogue outside of this forum as well. One reminder, tomorrow our guest will be Sankirtan Das, one of the world's foremost authorities on the Mahabharata, the great epic of Greater India. He has not only written his own synopsis of the Mahabharata, a slim book highlighting the main events of the Mahabharata, but he's acted in the Mahabharata in many versions of the Mahabharata. He's a professional storyteller. He goes to storytelling festivals all over the country and makes his living in that way. So we're looking forward to having him as our guest on the show tomorrow for Wisdom Wednesday from Sankirtan Das, who just recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of his being a disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, of getting married and chanting Hare Krishna. So let's join again tomorrow at the same time, same station, to take advantage of 50 years of devotional service from Sankirtan Das. In the meantime, don't forget to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.